The healthcare system in the U.S. is failing. Despite spending far more on healthcare than other high-income nations, the U.S. scores poorly on many key health measures, including life expectancy, preventable hospital admissions, suicide, and maternal mortality. Moreover, satisfaction with our system is at an all-time low. Many studies and experts point to the problems of high cost, inadequate access to health insurance policies, a system that is so complex, it's hard for most of us to figure it out. Large disparities in quality depending upon geography, socioeconomic status, and insurance coverage, and a system that focuses less on preventive care and more on high-cost interventions, including pharmaceuticals. The high price of prescription drugs is a major burden for many patients. Many people will even go without medical interventions rather than incur the cost of medical care, even if their life depends upon it. Welcome to GynoCurious. I am your host and creator, Dr. Amy Novatt. From both sides of the speculum, we are here to investigate what it means to be a healer and to be healed. Please send your comments to comments@radiofreerhinecliffe.org and take out your phones right now. And please give the show 5 stars and leave a comment. Please consider sharing with others. This really helps the show and the audience have access to it. So I am so excited to welcome Farah Jamani to the show today. Farah is a pharmacist, functional medicine, and mindset coach. This is kind of an unusual, uncommon combination of skills. And I thought that she would provide really just great insight into the problems that we face with big pharma and the limitations of pharmaceutical interventions and how to think about alternative ways of healing. Welcome, Farah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amy. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's so my pleasure to have you. So I guess I just want to start, because I like to start GynoCurious, with talking about like your arc, your professional arc. What made you become a pharmacist and then shift into the work that you're doing now?
You know, when I was a little girl, my favorite question was always why? Why is this happening? Why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? And I think it was that question and my innate desire to want to help people that drove me into being a pharmacist. And for 2 decades, I practiced as a pharmacist, both in community pharmacy as well as in senior level operations, where I was leading teams, but also helping patients really find their path with medications with the idea that we were creating health. But it was when my healthcare journey started and my health wasn't where I wanted it. But I was also seeing this as a parallel track in the pharmacy and community pharmacies where I was working, that women in their 40s were coming in, their labs were normal, but they were feeling anything but. They were exhausted. They didn't know, why things were shifting in their body. They felt like their brain wasn't on anymore. And they were starting to gain weight in their midsection. But because their labs were normal, the doctors really had nothing to provide them through a conventional lens. And so they would come to me and say, well, I was prescribed birth control, antidepressants, or sleeping pills. And I don't really feel I want to take any of those, but there has to be a better reason or a solution to make me feel better. Compare that to my own journey where I was struggling with the same things, but that had been going on for a number of years. And I was hitting a point where I was burnt out. I wasn't getting up properly in the morning. I wasn't able to look after my family in an effective way, in a way that I wanted. And I knew that something was shifting in me, and I was seeing it from both sides of my counter. And so not only was I being affected, they were being affected. And again, I went back to my favorite question, why? If medications weren't the answer, what was the root cause of why all this was happening? And that drove me into learning more and more about functional medicine, which is really the reason for why we have symptoms. What is the root cause? How do we remove friction from our body to create balance? And from there, I knew that that was going to be my path forward. But it's not enough to know what to shift. We all know what we should be doing. The art really is, how do we start to make those behavior changes? And that's where I went and became board certified as a mindset coach to help women really find ways for them to shift their own behavior by uncovering some of those beliefs that we hold, some of the stuck points in our mind that don't allow us to make these behavior shifts most effectively.
Yeah. So you've mentioned so many things. So I'm going to stop you there because I have a couple of questions. Your personal journey, would some people call it the perimenopause? Was this at a time, in terms of your chronology that was happening?
Yes. So I think there were a lot of confounding factors that were happening at that same time. I think for all of my 30s, I was super ambitious and I was running on too little for too long. Perimenopause was starting to creep in into my 40s. And then I was dealing with small children and grief. And so all of those factors confounded together to create this perfect storm where my body was at a point where I was finally starting to listen to the signals it was sending me as symptoms, where it was saying something has to shift. We can't keep continuing on.
It's remarkable how often, I know in my own personal journey, but also from hearing from other women, our body has to kind of scream at us before we make a shift. And I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about that psychology. And I don't know whether this is true for penis havers as well, but there is something to be said about this phenomenon for a lot of women. Can we explore that a little bit?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Gabor Mata uses the term women are the shock absorber of society. And
Mm,
I feel not only are we probably genetically predisposed to having those sensitivities, which evolutionarily was useful, we now are taking on so much in our role, both professionally, personally, that is adding to these layers of more and more honest. But there's so much within the patriarchy that keeps us hustling and grinding and striving to do more and more, where then you layer hormones on top of it. And we can't sustain ourselves in a monthly rhythm with not paying attention to those rhythms. So add all of those factors together and women become much more sensitive to these types of things.
yeah. Let's talk about root cause because you mentioned that, and I don't know that it means the same thing to everyone. So when you think about root cause, what is it? What is the definition for you?
The definition for me is when we look at a body, if we can assume that our bodies want to heal and our bodies want to do what they're supposed to be doing, what is causing the friction that's not allowing that to happen? So if we think about this from like a rock in your shoe, you wouldn't just go and put thicker socks on. You'd figure out, oh, I have a rock in my shoe. You take out the rock. And that's what we do with functional medicine is we take out the rocks that are creating that friction so your body feels good and it comes back into balance.
Yeah. In contrast to the world of big pharma, which is
Mm.
all about, at least in my interpretation and experience, is about taking care of the symptoms, but not eradicating the root cause. Maybe not when we're talking about diabetes, but certainly when it comes to women, hormonal a vast array of problems. And I thought before I become really cynical or critical of big pharma, I wanted to make sure I kind of shared some information with our audience. And I like this kind of data because it substantiates why I feel the way I do sometimes. And so I was reading that the pharmaceutical industry spent over 372 million on federal lobbying in 2022, making it the industry with the highest lobbying expenditures in the US. And the majority of pharmaceutical companies' revenue comes from steadily increasing prices of drugs on the market. That means if we just keep raising the costs of the medicine that you've been told that you need to have from your doctor, and it's sometimes very insidious. It's just a few cents here and there, or sometimes it's $1 or $2. And then all of a sudden you're facing a bill for a medicine you need to take every day that's exorbitant and prohibitive. What do you make of these numbers? Can we just talk about it a little bit?
I find those numbers staggering. And so, coming from Canada, where healthcare is, you don't pay out of pocket when you see a doctor. You can argue how is healthcare funded on the back end, but medication costs are rising and rising, just like in the US. And I think the initial point that you made is they don't solve the root cause in the majority of the situations. They are a band-aid. However, I look at them also as bridges. I am having one foot in the conventional side of medicine and one foot in the integrative functional side to create that integrative framework. Sometimes you need medications for relief. Sometimes you need
Absolutely.
that symptom relief. Where I feel things fall apart is that's the end of the story from a conventional world. is here's the medication, you're going to be on it for probably your life unless you make changes, but they don't talk about what those changes are. And therefore, it doesn't become a bridge. It becomes a Band-Aid. Where I like to look at it is, yes, use it as a bridge, get some relief, but work on the foundations of health as well, so that if and when you choose with your doctor to remove that bridge, you have some foundation for health underneath.
I agree. I mean, as cynical as I am, I absolutely think that I know that pharmaceuticals has a place in healing, and it's kind of miraculous in many, many ways. But there is this, at least here in the States, there's this knee-jerk reaction that happens a lot in the medical environment that's just, let me write you a script. Let's not really talk about your lifestyle, your stressors, your mental health, et cetera, et cetera. Let me just give you this medicine. And so there's often this it's a terrible avoidance of the root cause. It's a terrible ignoring of the root cause. And moreover, what I worry about is that these pharmaceutical interventions often have such significant side effects. I remember you mentioned young children. When my daughter was, I'm going to say 8 or 9, I don't know. And she was watching TV. And this was at a time where, streaming wasn't really happening. She was watching actual TV. And there was a pharmaceutical ad. And she kind of comes into the kitchen and she's like, Mommy, they just said this medicine, causes suicide and death and, all these incredibly scary things. She's like, why would anybody take that medicine? And it was such an interesting, from the mouths of babe, this kind of wonderful question that I had an answer, meaning that, well, sometimes people just have to take these medicines to be well. But it's true that, again, particularly with the industry as it is, there seems to be no conversation or very little conversation, unless it's said really, really quickly on an ad, what those risks are. How do you reconcile that with your patients? So if somebody tells you you're on a medicine and they talk about the side effects, where do you go as a pharmacist, but also as this enlightened person who's looking at the whole picture? How do you help people reconcile these side effects?
I think it goes back to even a conversation prior to that of either from their PCP, MD, or pharmacist when they're getting the medication to have a really informed conversation around the risks and benefits of this medication. To your point, there are times where you need to have this medication despite what the very severe side effects can look like, but those conversations aren't often had. Doctors are time crunched, pharmacists are time crunched. Providing a leaflet in a bag with your prescription is insufficient. So when patients come to me and we're having those conversations, this is the time when we have this informed consent. We have these conversations on what are these medications doing to you, your body, your mental health, all of those pieces. Let's make sure we are stopgapping any nutrient depletions that are happening from it. Let's stopgap any ways that we can support the body and system as a whole, so that if and when there comes a point in time where you discuss with your MD about coming off of that medication, you're well supported overall and you've had those conversations to understand what you've gotten yourself into. I think we spend so much time, even simple things, buying a car, we're well more informed about that than taking medications that could cause significant impact in the rest of us.
What does that say to you about the psychology of the patient? Like, why is there this? Is it just fear? Avoiding these truths because it's too much to handle?
I think it's so multifactorial. I think one of the pieces is we have this endemic of a comfort crisis. We want to have whatever symptom we're having now stopped. We live in a very Amazon-driven culture where we want a silver bullet. We want these things to go away now. We don't necessarily have the bandwidth, knowledge, or time to be able to put into actually fixing the problem. But we just are so overwhelmed in life that we're like, fine, just give me something that's going to help. Now, I am going to say the tide is substantially turning with the more nuanced conversations within functional medicine, as that is starting to become more mainstream, especially in the US. People are asking for more, they're demanding for more. And I think that tide is about to turn.
Yeah, interesting. It will be. I agree. I think something is shifting. The zeitgeist is different. It will be interesting to see how it impacts the use of pharmaceuticals. Yeah. And it's so interesting. I like this term you use, the endemic of the comfort society, and then combine that with kind of the narratives that you mentioned earlier that we have in our own heads, our own storylines about who we are, both as healthy and as healthy persons and as patients, and figuring out that story, if you will. Yeah, yeah. Were you raised in a family or in a culture in which kind of looking for health through diet and exercise and living well was acknowledged, or was that really never part of the conversation?
It's really interesting looking back. Yes, it was. I was not terribly healthy growing up. My asthma was out of control. My eczema was out of control. I was your typical atopic triad with eczema, food allergies, and asthma. And with that came a lot of medications, a lot of antibiotics. But layered on top of that was the sort of the Indian mentality and culture of using food as medicine, but also trying to make things from scratch at home to limit any outside exposure to allergens. So because of that, yes, there was a strong focus on food as medicine. There was a strong focus on taking your health into reclaiming your own power in your health, whilst also sort of straddling that line of conventional pharmaceuticals that it was needed. It was really interesting kind of juxtaposition of the two.
Yeah. I again am so curious about the way we evolve as professionals and our kind of early stories, particularly around health and wellness and illness and how they form and impact our decision making. It's very interesting. So I was looking at your website, and you, in your own words, describe yourself as a fixer, relentless, and stubborn. Can you? I love that trio. Can you elaborate on those qualities and why do you mention them in your website, and what do they do for you as a healer?
I'm an only child. Therefore, I have this stubborn streak in me, this relentless pursuit of an answer. And you can see it coming down the genetics as my own daughter is presenting that mirror to me. However, how that pertains to when clients come to me, it's not a quick fix. It's not just try this, off you go. I want to spend time with you. I want to listen to your story. To your point of the stories that we have of ourselves growing up, I never thought of myself as healthy as a kid. I never thought of myself as healthy even when I was 30. It was only now in my 40s where I can really see that shift of creating this new identity and stepping into it, of being healthy, being in control of my health. And what does that mean? And therefore, I like to bring that to my clients. They come in with whatever story they have about themselves or identity they have around their illness, their diagnosis, but they've creating that into themselves. When we can start to shift out of that and see options and opportunities, that's where the true healing can start to happen. And I like to say fixer because really your body wants to be brought back into balance. We just need to find ways to do it. So hence the relentless pursuit. It may not be just one surface level issue because once you start to peel back the onion, you start to see other signals and symptoms start to emerge. But that's not a failing. That means that now we've broken the ice at the top. Now we're starting to work our way through to get to that root cause of what is going on for you. So it's a partnership between the two of us.
What I love about integrative medicine is actually that taking apart the layers, and that I've never met a human being where it was just simple. Even if I don't, even if it's a scar, I don't know, a cut on your arm, there's an inquiry around, why did you get the cut? Why is the cut not healing? What, et cetera, et cetera. And I love that as a scientist and as a healer, but it's certainly not really a part of the culture of certainly allopathic medicine. It's let me call it a diagnosis, let me fix it in a few steps, and not really peeling away the onion. So what are some of the tools or ways of speaking to your patients that you help them kind of uncover these layers and get into this deeper place, the root cause or causes?
Yeah, it really starts with the intake and having those conversations with them But it's not just as simple as tell me what you eat and how you move and how you sleep. Yes, of course, those physical pieces of health are so important. And that's really where we start. So they start to feel better, but it's getting into the emotional side of their health. Talk to me a little bit about stress. What's going on in your life? How is that showing up for you? What tools do you have to manage it? And you start to listen for some of the stories they're starting to tell. Everyone wants to come in and be told, what do I eat and how do I feel better? We don't necessarily need to start there. We've got to look at how dysregulated is your nervous system? Are you stuck in on? Are you collapsed? How do we get into this healing part of your nervous system for you to even feel what that feels like so that healing can really begin? From there, I really start to, as the journey continues with them, then we start to break down some other stories that they start to have about what does their future hold? What are possibilities? And if they can't hold the possibility for themselves, that's where I come in. I can hold that possibility for you. I can know that healing is possible on the other end of this door. You just have to let me open the door and you got to take some steps to walk through.
Yeah, great, great. I have to ask, I'm going to go back a little bit because as a person who lives in Canada, many of us Americans will say, oh, if we only had the medical world of Canada, things would just be so much better. Can we talk a little bit about it? Because obviously the grass is always greener on the other side. Can you speak to me about what it's like to be a pharmacist there, but also as an integrative person, how the medical community embraces you, but also how they take care of the patients?
So there's a few layers in that. So I am mostly out of community pharmacy now, but when I was in there, we don't have the same worries, I'll say, as Americans will have about do you choose healthcare and getting a diagnosis and an investigation, or do I put food on the table? Because you can go into a hospital, doctor's office, and whatnot, and be treated and seen and diagnosed, that piece is not as big an issue, but we still have the same pharmaceutical issues that you do. We still have people who want the magic bullet. We still have rising costs within pharmaceuticals, and they're not often covered. So whether your own private insurance through work doesn't cover it, the government does support through Canada, at least in Ontario and other provinces. That is not always the case, though, for some people. So there are rising costs. The other layer, though, is your question around how is integrative care seen? And I'm going to say it's new in Canada. It's a bit fledgling in terms of people understand naturopathy. They understand other complementary allied healthcare professionals. But this true integrative care that blends conventional with functional is in its infancy and its roots. But I think people are really wanting it because they feel seen. They understand that it's evidence-based. They understand that there is science behind it. They understand it can work complementarily to their conventional practitioner as well. And so they do want that. Where I can see it going a bit sideways, however, is if it becomes green pharmacy, right? We're trading supplements for medications, and that's really not what we want to see. We want to see how does diet, lifestyle, mindset, and yes, of course, some key supplements to kind of turbocharge that. How does that synergy all come together?
Can you unpackage that a little bit more about, green pharmacy and why? Can you just talk a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah. So throughout the years when I was going on my own healing journey, when I was looking at other practitioners to support me before I became as well versed as I am, I would be given a diagnosis from there, and then I would be given a whole pile of supplements to take. And looking back in retrospect, I didn't know, and I thought, right, I'm giving my power out to somebody else to sell all of these supplements because they will heal me. When you look at it, how is that any different from conventional medications? Is that truly solving the cause? And perhaps in some cases it is, because it is bringing the body back into balance and giving it perhaps some nutrients it was missing or adaptogens it could be supported with. But if that's the end of the story, there is no difference between pharmaceuticals and supplements. If there is no foundation put forth within nutrition and lifestyle to create that foundation in health. So Hopefully that explains a little bit more
No,
what
it's
green.
great. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we both know that the supplement industry is also a multi-billion-dollar phenomenon. So it is also driven to some degree by money and greed and overuse. And I like to remind my patients, listen, just because you've heard vitamin C is good for you doesn't mean that it doesn't have a shadow. That every supplement also can be problematic. And moreover, that until you learn how to eat properly, that's really where you're going to get your nutrients from and metabolize best and find a healthier way of being. So start eating better and stop taking 18 supplements. Yeah.
Well, I think people really want that quick fix. They want to
Yeah.
feel better. Blame them for that. And then you see marketing that supports that. And people think, amazing, I'm going to try that. However, to your point, there is a shadow. In pharmacy, we always say the right dose, the right duration, and for the right patient.
Mm,
And using those principles when it comes to supplements allows you to bring that power back in your health back to you. You're not giving it to a practitioner, a gimmicky supplement, the latest fad diet, thinking it's right for you. It might be great for some people. It might not be right for you.
right, right. Again, what integrative medicine and complementary healing modalities do so well, if you're in the right office with the right healer, is that it addresses you as an individual. And that two vegetarians may walk in the door with very different diets. So, really listening and attending to the individual nuance stories that a person has is such an important part of this exchange, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I'm going back to Canada. Does Canada pay for visits to someone like yourself?
Unfortunately, not at this time.
Yeah. Interesting.
However, I hope that tide is going to start to shift. I
Mm-hmm.
hope as more practitioners start to become certified in that, but also as more patients start to demand it.
Yeah.
And I think not getting the answers from their conventional physicians or healers, they are going to start to look at other modalities, and most other allied professionals are not covered in Canada.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So, I want to tell the audience about how I first heard about you. We have both been fortunate enough to have visited Isabella Rossellini's farm in Long Island, a farm. And I heard about you and your retreat, The Real Reset. And I'd like you to tell us about it and how that came to be in your life.
Yeah. So the Real Reset is a annual retreat that we host at Mama Farm. And we host it there for a variety of reasons, not least of which it is so healing. It's beautiful. It is surrounded by, I think, 23 acres of nature. And we started it there. And 2025 is going to be our second year and third retreat where we were asked to participate in there. And I was asked to lead this retreat by Electra. So she runs the farm, but she's also gone on this journey with me. And so in her time, she really has found that the way you eat, the way you live, the way you think is so integral to how you show up in the rest of your life. And I like to say you can have peak performance at home and work and in life when you're managing those three pieces. And so we brought elements of my 12-week program, the Reset RX, to Mama Farm, and we pulled elements out to teach women there all those pieces. How are we going to eat? How are we going to live? And how are we going to think? Often to break free from burnout, balance hormones, lose that midlife fluff, and really to reclaim the power in your own health in order to transform your life. And women who've gone through this process, they can't even believe the results that they're seeing and how they feel even just after the retreat for a weekend. Because of the camaraderie and community of women that come together, it feels like a sisterhood. The food is incredible and it's anti-inflammatory, so your body starts that healing process. And moreover, we start really regulating down the nervous system. So when you think about healing from a physical perspective, an emotional perspective, and a spiritual perspective, This retreat gives you elements of it all. So it's a really, really magical kind of retreat.
Wonderful. So we have to tap into the question about mid body weight because it's, I don't know, quite frankly, I don't know any patient going through the perimenopause who doesn't speak to me about this. Even the skinniest of skinny will talk about, what are these love handles? I've never had these before. So can you give us kind of a bit of information about that, please?
Yeah. So, nobody talks to us about this. Nobody
No
tells
one.
us what's happening during menopause and all of these insidious symptoms that start to creep up. And some of the symptoms of signals we can kind of manage, but it's when that midlife weight starts to creep up, our body composition starts to shift. Really, that's when we start paying attention. And most women I see have this. They come to me for that. And they want to feel like themselves. They want to feel confident in their body again. They don't know what's happening and they really don't know how to stop it because what they did in their 20s and 30s is no longer working. And so from that angle, now we're starting to have to shift this metabolic flexibility for them. We're having to tap into them being like a hybrid vehicle. Yes, they can burn carbs for energy, but now they have to learn and teach their body how to burn their own body stores and burn fats for energy. Between the hormonal flux that's happening in perimenopause, the creeping stressors that are keeping the stress hormones high, and then therefore the impact to their blood sugar handling system, all this trifecta comes together in our 40s, and this is setting ourselves up for what's going to come on in the next few decades. So what we do in our 40s is so integral to, yes, of course, how we look and how we feel and how we're going to carry on in the future. But it is setting ourselves up for success or failure if we're not taking control of it now in this decade and in decades to come.
So you're helping women figure out their glucose control. You're talking to them about trying to quiet the nervous system so you're not just on hyper alert all the time, so that in fact metabolism can occur, and shifting the way they look at what they put in their mouth, because again, maybe they could always eat a bagel every morning for 2 decades, but all of a sudden that bagel is just now around their belly and it's not being broken down well.
Yeah, I like to teach that. I teach you how to put down those internal stress fires in your body that are keeping the stress hormones high. And therefore, once we start to quiet those pieces down, your inflammation starts to come down. And as a consequence, your weight starts to come down.
Yeah. It's often on GynoCurious, I'm talking to healers about the perimenopause, but just obviously just about being well. And it's striking how true it is that everything's connected. That I like to joke that whoever's saying, the knee bone's connected to the ankle bone was a healer, because they realized, I can't just fix the knee. I got to fix the ankle as well, et cetera, et cetera. So what you're speaking to again is this concept that it's not just one thing. It's a multitude of things. It's not only from an external point of view, but also the individual has her own trifectas and challenges, and then it's putting it all together, which is work. And I will sometimes meet women who say, thank you for all this information, but I can't do it all. So how do you respond to the woman who says, thank you very much, Farah, but it's just too much? How do you help her address this?
Well, to your point, conventional medicine often looks at us as silos. Functional medicine, integrative medicine looks at us as symptoms. And so to the woman who, is in her midlife, has challenges for her kids, maybe is helping aging parents, is climbing the corporate ladder, she doesn't have a lot of bandwidth to do a massive protocol. And so we start with one thing. Where can you affect a 1% shift in your life? And often I will help her work through, what is that lead domino that has to fall first for you? Sometimes for most women, it's sleep. If I can get you sleeping, your cravings go down, you have more energy, you're making better choices, and you feel that you have your head above water and you have bandwidth. For some women, it's like, listen, your glycemic control, your blood sugar control is out the window. We've got to get that under control first. And that's where we're going to start. But it's that 1% shift over time that is what I want to teach them to do. Because most women who will come to you or me are probably very ambitious, high performing women who do want to do it all and will probably try because they're super motivated, but then they feel like failures because they can't do it all. So let's remove that external success metric from there. Let's teach you to do a 1% shift in the areas that give you the biggest ROI.
Yeah, well put, well put. I mean, how many times have I known a woman who says, "Oh yeah, I started going to the gym. I'm going to the gym every single day. I spend 2 hours there. I'm doing this, and this, and nothing's changing." And I have to kind of quiet the conversation and say, "Let's just stop and breathe for a moment because you're telling me it's not working. So let's talk about why it might not be working. What are the other factors? What are the other ways of approaching exercise that may in fact not be, as aggressive, but actually more impressive and more successful for what your goals are?"
I think it's this midlife time where we really need to start to assess doing less and getting better results. And that is
Mm.
a mindset shift for most women to manage because we are always taught we have to hustle harder, do more, try more. And that piece of that pushing, that hustling, and that's what's keeping your nervous system so dysregulated. That's what's keeping those stress fires up and your stress hormones up in your body. And you're constantly pushing against this tide that's not moving. So let's try something new. And it's in that trying something new that, yes, you're going to get better results, but you have to get women to buy into that first because that's not the culture that we live in.
Yeah, which is what I love about the retreat that you run because there is something so inspiring about being with a community of other persons like you, women or perimenopausal or whatever definition we might use for that cohort. And just not feeling alone in this journey is so helpful.
Mhm.
To be able to talk about this stuff with humor, with compassion, with empathy is so, so important. And again, there's something really inspiring about making even that, 1% change after a retreat like you have that can be so successful. So I guess to everyone out there, if you can get to Mama Farm and get to this retreat, please try to do so. And thankfully there are other retreats and opportunities out there. But Farah, if somebody wants to learn more about you, how do they do that?
They can go onto my Instagram at the _holistic pharmacist, send me a message. They can go to my website, farahjamani.com, send me a message. And those are two of the best ways to reach out. Yes, we do retreats. It's beautiful. You finally get to put down your heavy bag of stress that you're carrying every day and be looked after and taught actionable tools to take home with you so you can start that shift. Some people don't have access to that. Some people just want it now. And so we can work together over a course of 12 weeks to take you from where you are now to where you thought you could never be and with a toolkit for that transformational success. I never want to teach someone a quick fix, a detox, anything like that, because that's not useful. That doesn't give you a toolkit. I want to teach you how to be well now, but how to stay well for the rest of your life, especially starting in midlife.
Yeah, because certainly what we know now about women in the midlife is that the risks of cardiac disease, diabetes, cancers just really increase during that perimenopause and into the postmenopause. So if one can create a lifestyle earlier than the perimenopause that's going to suspend you and sustain you over those years, it's so, so important. And if you're already in the perimenopause, it doesn't mean it's too late. It just means that it's time to reevaluate, how you're spending your life and ways in which to help prevent chronic disease.
Mhm. And ways for you to look better, feel better, and how to live better longer. Because I think that's what we all want as women. We
Mm,
want to be able to do all the things we ever wanted to do, have energy to be able to do it, feel confident in our body to be able to do it. And then, therefore, now when we're stepping into those years, have the self awareness and wisdom to be able to do all of the things that we want.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. So it's a great segue. Thank you to my last question for you. I love to talk about pleasure and ways in which each of us, as women, find pleasure in our lives. What would you say gives you great pleasure?
Oh, so much. And it's such a lovely question because when I see women in this demographic, they often tend to have no idea, how do they seek pleasure? How do they have joy? How do they have connection? And that's such a missing spiritual component of their health. And so every day I actively will look for ways to make things feel lovelier. And that's one of the questions I'll ask clients. Okay, great, you're going to do X. How do we make this feel more lovely to you? How do we ritualize things? So pleasure can come in any form. For me, it's walking my giant dog in nature every day. It's having a mushroom hot chocolate every single day. No guilt associated. It's just reveling in the day-to-day and being mindful through those. And it sounds so cliche, but it is really connecting to those pieces that are so important. My family, my work, myself. How do I do more in this world? But that to me is pleasure. And it's building that into your day-to-day, whether it's connecting with friends, whether it's in your weeks or in your months, but finding ways to tap into things that make you happy and that you can recognize that through your day-to-day.
The intentionality of it. Yeah. Because in a busy world, in a stressful life, fun isn't easily had. So figuring out what works for you and taking an opportunity to have it, be in it, find pleasure in it. Yes, indeed.
And giving yourself permission to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and getting rid of the guilt stuff. Yeah. It's so disempowering. It has no real role in our lives. Guilt, that is.
I see so many women coming in who are perfectionists, people pleasing, and they're waiting for someone to give them that permission to have fun or that they can do it after. And they're always left at the bottom of the totem pole and left to have crumbs. I teach you to be able to have all of that and put yourself at the top without the shame, the guilt, or without neglecting the rest of your responsibilities, because that is the way that you're going to be able to move it forward and enjoy the rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. I have to ask, what kind of dog do you have?
He is a 60-pound rescue golden doodle.
Oh,
He is a
fun.
bundle of energy and is delightful. However, he's not a small dog.
It's funny. I have a dog as well, and I was washing her up after her playing in the mud yesterday, and I just realized I was like giggling out loud. I was having such joy spending time with this animal. So I'm a true believer. Thank you, Farah, for joining me today. I'm so grateful for your time and your expertise and clearly your passion around taking care of women. Thank you.
Sure, Dr. Amy, thank you so much. And thank you for all that you're doing to raise the awareness for this concept for women in their midlife.
It's my pleasure. And thank you to Jen Hammoud and Maddie Rosenberg, my co-producers. Thank you to the Epicurean for having us at Radio Free Rhinecliff. And until next episode, next week, please stay well. Listen to your instincts and intuitions. They are the greatest of teachers, not to be ignored.